Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joseph Jung from the Catholic University of Korea. Today, I'm going to talk about the result of comparison analysis of Ki-67 labeling index patterns of diffuse large B-cell lymphomas and Burkitt lymphomas using image analysis. Diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, DLBCL, is the most common high-grade B-cell lymphoma comprising morphologically, biologically, and clinically heterogeneous subgroups with various cellular morphologies, molecular characteristics with a high proliferation index. Burkitt lymphoma is a highly aggressive type of B-cell lymphoma characterized by the translocation of MYC, EBV virus infection, and Ki-67 proliferation labeling index of nearly 100%. Some types of DLBCLs morphologically resemble features of Burkitt lymphoma and have a high proliferation index of more than 95%. Majority of these cases possess translocation of MYC, BCL2, and or BCL6. These are called double hit or triple hit lymphomas and sometimes exhibit a blastoid appearance. These cases were referred in the 2008 WHO classification to as B-cell lymphoma unclassifiable with features intermediate between DLBCL and Burkitt lymphoma, and were divided into two categories based on genetic abnormalities in the 2018 classification: high-grade B-cell lymphoma with double, triple hit mutation, and high-grade B-cell lymphoma not otherwise specified. However, this has complicated the pathological diagnosis of high-grade B-cell lymphoma since the morphology criteria of features intermediate between DLBCL and Burkitt lymphoma is very arbitrary and can be interpreted subjectively by individuals. And the definition of nearly 100% Ki-67 labeling index, which is characteristic for Burkitt lymphoma, was not clearly determined yet. In terms of the Ki-67 level proliferation index, there can be passenger lymphocytes and residing stromal cells in the microenvironment of the lymphoma that can affect the final count of positive cells. Moreover, there is no specific cutoff value for nearly 100% positivity in Burkitt lymphomas. As we employed image analysis software on reporting the Ki-67 labeling index, we have noticed the proportional difference in the patterns of Ki-67 staining between Burkitt lymphoma and DLBCLs. Thus, we designed a comparative morphometric analysis and evaluate the cutoff value for the Ki-67 index in differentiating DLBCLs and Burkitt lymphomas. The purpose of this study is to compare the Ki-67 index patterns between DLBCLs and Burkitt lymphomas, and second, to find the optimal cutoff value for differentiating DLBCLs and Burkitt lymphomas. HE slides and corresponding Ki-68 IHC slides pathology confirmed DLBCL and Burkitt lymphoma from 8 hospital branches at Seoul, Yeouido, Eunpyeong, Incheon, Bucheon, Ujeongbu, Daejeon St. Mary's Hospital, and Suwon St. Vincent Hospital between 2013 and 2019 were used. The HE slides and corresponding Ki-67 IHC slides were reviewed by 2 hematopathologist specialists in association with age, sex, and molecular subtypes of DLBCL and other IHC markers and EBV positivity and FISH for BCL2, BCL6, and MYC translocation. The molecular subtype of DLBCL was reconfirmed based on Hans algorithm. Ki-67 IHC slides were reviewed before image acquisition, and cases with post-staining, such as faint staining, were excluded. We acquired 4 to 10 representative Ki-67 images from the most proliferative areas of each case and analyzed using the FDA-cleared image analysis system, GENESIS, high path of applied spectral imaging according to the manufacturer's instructions. Auto-white balancing was performed before capturing the image. Total and stained cells were counted using a 3-tier classification system based on the staining intensity, which is negative, 1 positive, 2 positive, and 3 positive. We compared the patterns between DLBCL and Burkitt lymphoma, ABC and GBC subtypes of DLBCLs, and Burkitt lymphoma and DLBCL with high proliferation index. As a result, a total 29 cases of Burkitt lymphoma and 103 cases of DLBCL samples were included for the comparison. The average age of patients with DLBCL was 11 years higher than that of patients with Burkitt lymphoma. Burkitt lymphoma and DLBCL was found in more males than females, although this difference was not statistically significant. Around 5,700 cells were counted in both groups. There were significant differences in proportions of Ki-67 positive cells between DLBCL and Burkitt lymphoma. As you can see in figure A, the number and the proportion of negative cells, which comprise of passenger and true negative cells, were significantly lower in Burkitt lymphoma than those in DLBCLs. Among positive cells in figure B, the number and proportion of 1 positive and 2 positive cells were significantly lower in Burkitt lymphoma than those in DLBCLs. In figure 3, the proportion of 1 positive and 2 positive cells among Ki-67 positive cells were lower in Burkitt lymphoma than that in DLBCLs, and proportion of 2 positive and 3 positive cells among Ki-67 positive cells were higher in Burkitt lymphoma than that of DLBCLs. If we look at the Ki-67 index pattern between ABC and GCB types, there were total 73 ABC and 30 GCB types. There were no significant difference in the age or sex. There were no significant difference in the number or proportion of Ki-67 negative cells between two types. There was significant difference in the number and the proportion of its positive cells among all positive cells. In figure D, you can also find that there is no difference in the number and proportion of negative cells between ABC and GCB types. You can see in figure E that the number and the proportion of 2 positive cells were significantly higher in the ABC subtypes than those in the GCB subtypes, while those of 3 positive cells were significantly lower in ABC than those in GCB types. Subsequently, the proportion of 1 positive and 2 positive cells among the positive cells was significantly higher in ABCs than that in GCBs. This is the representative images of Ki-67 IHC of Burkitt lymphoma, ABC, and GCB subtypes of DLBCLs. As you can see in figure A to C, Burkitt lymphoma shows high Ki-67 with uniformly high intensity. In DLBCLs, you might notice that there are more negative cells and more 1 positive or 2 positive cells than Burkitt lymphoma. Between ABC and GCB types, it is hard to tell the difference at first sight, but on image analysis, there were more 1 positive and 2 positive cells and less 3 positive cells in GCB types among all positive cells. To simulate a clinical setting with high Ki-67 index, we arbitrarily define the high proliferating tumor as those with more than 90% of 2 positive or 3 positive Ki-67 positive cells. In this comparison, there were 29 Burkitt lymphoma and 23 ABC and 19 GCB subtypes. The average age was slightly higher in these DLBCLs, which is the same with all DLBCLs. The proportion of the cells were almost identical to the comparison between Burkitt lymphoma and total DLBCLs. Although DLBCL with a high proliferation index showed similarly high index to that of Burkitt lymphomas, the number and the proportion of 3 positive cells were higher in Burkitt lymphoma than those in DLBCLs. And those of negative cells, 1 positive and 2 positive cells, were higher in DLBCLs than those in Burkitt lymphomas. We performed ROC analysis to detect the most effective value for differentiating Burkitt lymphoma and DLBCLs. The AUC was highest for the proportion of 2 positive and 3 positive cells with 98.1% sensitivity and 100% specificity. The optimal cutoff value was 97.9% for the proportion of 2 positive and 3 positive cells. Thus, the samples with more than 97.9% of 2 positive and 3 positive cells can be considered as Burkitt lymphoma rather than DLBCLs. Conclusions. First, Burkitt lymphoma samples had lower number and proportion of negative and 1 positive cells and higher number and proportion of 2 positive and 3 positive cells, particularly 3 positive cells, than DLBCLs regardless of the subtypes. That is, in Burkitt lymphoma, the tumor cells were more homogeneous population with intense nuclear Ki-67 staining and with reduced proportion of passenger cells in the background. Second, using a cutoff value of 97.9% for the 2 positive and 3 positive cells among the Ki-67 positive cells, it was possible to differentiate between Burkitt lymphoma and DLBCL by image analysis with very high sensitivity and specificity. Third, the GCB subtype of DLBCL possesses a higher proportion of 2 positive and 3 positive cells than that in the ABC subtype that mimic the Ki-60 staining pattern found for Burkitt lymphomas. Taken together, we performed image analysis and found that the Ki-60 labeling index might serve as a very sensitive and specific marker for differentiating between Burkitt lymphoma and DLBCL among high-grade B-cell lymphoma with a high proliferation index. Combining this Ki-67 labeling pattern to histology, ISE, and EBB-specific assay might help reach a more conclusive pathological diagnosis of the cancer and choose an adequate molecular test for potential double-hit, triple-hit lymphoma. Thank you.